And dramatic, we're live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining Ali and I. This is our third episode ever of our podcast. So Ali and I, we're two good friends who've decided to come together to talk about the books that we love and adore that have had a big impact on our lives. So the book we've chosen for this particular episode is Tim Ferriss, the book 4 Hour Workweek. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah. And if you're returning, you probably should ask yourself why.
Yeah,
why are you returning?
A very good question. I know.
Sorry,
we're a little bit late. Sorry, we're a little bit late as well. We just had a little bit of technical difficulties. But
what do you mean late? I didn't put a time, so I don't even know why you're bringing that up. Because now you've made the error noticeable.
Yeah, I know. Well, I had a countdown timer that like at least 5 people saw. So
okay. So sorry to those 5 people who are going to join us before.
Yeah.
But look. The book we decided to pick, and look, one of the reasons why we decided to do this as well is Ali and I often catch up almost on a weekly basis, and we find ourselves having these kind of conversations that we deem to be soul nourishing for one another. And it's generally based around like a principle or two that we've read from a book. And we kind of love doing this. And part of the reason why we're doing this is we just thought it would be a great opportunity to share some of the insights and maybe even discuss with some of you. So, if you're listening to this live, then you can feel free to leave a comment as well and let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this book if you've read it. Now, to give you the summary, because Ali refuses to do it, the summary of Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Workweek, I believe it's a book that, first of all, creates a mindset shift. So first of all, it helps you create a mindset shift that you don't have to do 9 till 5. You can kind of take back ownership of your time and learn how to become more effective as opposed to just be efficient, which is something we can talk about later. So the book kind of, first of all, makes you aware. It creates a big paradigm shift of you don't have to live this way. Everyone's living this way. You can choose to live an alternate way if you want to. And then it goes into the full pragmatics of here are the strategies on how you can actually only work 4 hours a week and become more effective. And then towards the end of the book is, talking about the concept of mini retirements, because we tend to be living in a way where we begin our lives with education. Then the middle of our lives, we're just working our asses off to make as much money as we can. And then the concept of then just retiring and then, kind of doing nothing after that and sitting on the beach and drinking your favorite beverage. Whereas Tim Ferriss kind of reveals that that's just the poster. That's actually not a way of life. So that's kind of the high level summary. And, this is where I will pass the ball to you, Ali. And what do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I think you gave it again. Awesome summary. Hence why you do this gig so well. It's the intro man, our host. I think you've nailed it there. For me, the book I found it one of the best guides on, I guess, time allocation and productivity, probably. I think it's one of those books that has a really cheesy title, but when you look deeper into it, there's some super practical and applicable bits of advice within it.
It does come across a little bit scammy, I think. The 4 hour work week. This is, make $1 million in the next 12 months. Like,
yeah.
There's a little bit of snake oil in the title, which I think was one of the reasons why I didn't read it.
Yeah.
When it just came out.
Well, it's also one of those books that I think people are a bit embarrassed to admit that they've read it, because when you say, you got to check out this book, The 4 Hour Workweek, it just doesn't sound legitimate. And to me, it's not really about that. I still don't know if there's much value in the concept of actually living a 4 hour work week, right? Because most people don't really do that anyway. I haven't seen it applied in too many shapes and forms. It might be a small number where that's true, but what I do think that the book does provide is just a really cool framework for decision-making, for prioritization, for probably getting closer to freedom. I think you nailed it in that opening sentence where it was about how do you move away just from the traditional way? And it talks a lot, he thinks quite differently. And he provides different, I guess, angles to view very traditional problems, which I really liked when I first read it. I'm like, oh yeah, I love this style of thinking. You don't have to follow the traditional rules. There's other ways to look at the same situation.
Well, there was one of my favorite quotes was by Mark Twain. And he said that whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect.
Yeah. Yep.
Isn't that brilliant? I mean, I think
Love it.
it just stops us from kind of falling victim to mediocrity and normalcy, right? It made me think very differently. I read this book first time probably about 6-7 years ago. And huge paradigm shift, because for me, and let's pick a topic to talk about first, Ali. I think the first one, and I allowed myself a page of notes. Last time I came into the podcast with like 8 pages of notes, and I was like scrolling through, not knowing where things were. But I loved the idea. The first time I read it, I loved the idea of effective versus efficient. Right. And if you define it, effective is doing things that get you closer to your goal. And efficient is defined as being doing specific tasks in the most economical way possible. And another quote that I really loved was that being efficient without regards to being effective is the world's default way of being. Right. So meaning that we all seek to be more efficient. We all seek to use our time better without any thought of how that task helps us move towards our goals. And then that kind of big lesson was then linked to the 80-20 rule. So the way you become more effective is by identifying what's the 20% of things that you do that gives you 80% of the results. And if you're new to this concept is fantastic. I mean, I think you kind of live and breathe this idea, Ali, that what are the power moves you can make that will give you the biggest results, as opposed to focusing on the 20%, also the 80% that give you 20% of the results.
For sure. I think that was one of the biggest things. I read it about 6-7 years ago. And that concept of 80-20ing life essentially is probably one of the biggest things that I've tried to embed. And I was probably doing that even prior to reading it. But then when you actually see it on paper and seeing him and how he applies it, it cleared it up. But yeah, you've nailed it there. Like that, I think there's one of the terms he uses is work for work's sake, which is something that's really embedded in the probably traditional working environment, where it's do your list of tasks. Make sure you do them this way every single time. And sometimes that's required. But I think the notion of looking for effectiveness, and yeah, I've got it in my notes as well, where he has like a really simple exercise on the 80-20 rule. And I think it's as simple as and for people that don't understand what the 80-20 rule is, it's Pareto's law, where it talks about generally in life, 20% of your inputs will result in 80% of the outcomes. 20% of 80% of your happiness will probably result from 20% of people in your life. And that rule's been expanded over time, where it's like 10-90, 5-95. But the whole idea is that, all things aren't really equal. All actions aren't really equal. All decisions.
And I can tell you that's super true in the example you just gave, in that I can tell you that out of all the people that I know, most of my happiness comes, like, let's say there's maybe 100 people that I'm kind of connected with. I would say 10 people, 8 people bring me the most happiness.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting kind of concept to see how that comes up, not only in business, but in friendships. That comes up also in work effectiveness, in marketing, in everything. And I think even... Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. That's like the first time we've ever done this.
That felt wrong. That felt really weird.
We need a sound effect.
What just happened?
Yeah,
that's never happened before.
And end it. Let's start again. That's hilarious.
All right. I'm just going to go. No, what is going on? All right, you go first.
I was just going to say, like, and this is so like the crescendo here is so stupid, but I was just thinking about phone apps. When you look even at your phone apps, you can have 100 apps on there. It's probably like 8 or 9 that you're actually going to use. Yeah, that was it. That wasn't worth it.
Okay, it wasn't worth us. Yeah, it wasn't worth us fighting over. But what I was going to say, probably more worth it. But I was just going to say that during this whole kind of pandemic, I've realized that instead of kind of focusing on all of my clients and so many of them, I focus on a very small group of maybe 6 clients that I'm working with right now. And that focus has allowed me to be able to create more opportunities than if right now I was focusing on all of them. So it's a very powerful rule that when you kind of review all the different areas of your life and go, how can I apply this 80-20? How can I apply this 90-10 rule? It's actually pretty powerful, even down to like for my wife and I, Pei Wen is her name. And we think about what are the core activities that we do that we really like when we do it, it's just like a really peak experience. Because there's so many little things that we do, and sometimes you do it out of, we're creatures of habit. But then when you boil down those core activities that really spark joy and chemistry, then it's just a phenomenal concept.
100%. Even in terms of overwhelm, when people have big to-do lists or like, I don't know, like a lot of people that I speak to where I've got 50 things that I want to do. The 80-20 rule is such a cool way of being able to prioritize and then actually pick out the few key bits that are going to bring, maybe 80% plus off the enjoyment or majority. It's never that clean cut, but that concept of breaking it down, using that as a mechanism of putting everything out there as a smorgasbord and then thinking, all right, well, does this fit into Pareto's law?
Well, I think I'm sitting here from the mindset of, look, this obviously it's so profound and, we've bought into this, but I'm trying to think back to myself before I learned this. And before I learned this, I think one of the reasons I didn't do it was because I thought being busy was the right thing to do. Yeah. I remember just, people who are busy, the way I perceived them was, wow, this person works so hard. Yep. And that definitely in the Asian culture, I can tell you now, is something that's hugely praised. So when you see someone that's, I used to work at my dad's grocery store. My family, we started one of the first Asian groceries in South Australia. And the person who worked, 14 hours was the one that was financially rewarded the most. In the family was like, wow, this person works so hard for the family. They're praised, loved. Whereas, the person who comes in, works a couple of hours and leaves, it kind of gets,
Yeah, it's a cultural thing, right? You have to be seen to be the first one in, the last one out, working hard. Well, again, I can't remember. I was reading or listening to something with Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba. And when he was traveling outside of China for the first time and going into Europe, that they saw people taking Sunday off for the first time. And I think Jack's wife was like, they're obviously working their second job. Like he couldn't even fathom that somebody would take a day off away from their shop. And then the weekend was something
There was a brilliant Asian comedian. I think it was Ronnie Cheng. I can't remember if he's the one that said this. Sorry if I allocated this to the wrong person. But he was saying that you should pick an Asian prime minister or an Asian president because we'll take no days off. Right. And he was saying how, Thanksgiving, we don't care about Thanksgiving. What the hell? Who cares? We don't care about Christmas. Who cares? Make the money. Right. So it was funny how, but that's so embedded into our culture that these comedians were taking it out as an example and using it as a bit of fun.
Well, imagine you going to your dad and being like, hey, Dad, I've got this new book. It's called The 4-Hour Workweek.
4-Hour Workweek. Oh, he goes, see what happened when you don't have the degree? No degree, no brain, man. You dumbo. He'd drive him crazy. He'd drive my dad crazy. Because they've been ingrained their entire lives that the volume of work, there's a correlation between volume of work and quality of work. So again, bringing us back to that original concept of effective versus efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. I think that was a game changer for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because, I followed the likes of, Gary Vaynerchuk and all these different entrepreneurs on Instagram and YouTube. And the hustle culture was something that I was heavily influenced by.
Yeah.
And also I kept busy because I wanted other people to perceive me as being a hard worker. And I achieved that because people were like, damn, man, you work so hard. Wow, this is amazing. Yeah. Yet I wasn't being effective. I wasn't moving closer to my goals and wasn't getting there faster.
Yeah. So I'm probably on the other side of that scale where I like the perception that it's very easy, but then the hard work sort of like the legs are kicking underneath the surface. So it's really the opposite thing. Like even when I was going through school or going through uni, I'd spend so much more of the time of thinking about how easily can I complete this thing or how efficiently can I complete it rather than actually working on the specific task. I was trying to build a system behind it so that longer term, the uni assignments would just get easier and easier and the results would get better and better over time. So I was still probably spending the same amount of time as the hardworking student, but I wasn't spending it on the thing that you were meant to be traditionally spending it on. And so the perception was, it's just very laconic, it's very seamless and easy. And I've always sort of tried to put that approach in where instead of doing the repetitive moves, it's like, is there an alternative, bigger 80-20 type of move that you can make? And sometimes it exists, sometimes it doesn't. They're harder to find. I find I think the hustle mentality is possibly an effective framework over the long term because it's consistent, right? Like if you do go with volume every day, day in, day out, there will be a result. You'd think, you're going to point forward there. But then on the flip side, I think those that can find the biggest move in alignment with the opportunity that's available for maximum effectiveness, there's something special in that. And it's probably a combination of both.
The danger of playing the volume game is that you then leave no time to live.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that whole kind of quote, right? It's what I bloody went through last year, was that you're living just to work. You're living just for the volume of work because you've defined yourself by the volume of work. You've defined your kind of efficiency and how successful you are by your volume of work. And then you live to work, you don't work to live.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge danger in that. So one of the reasons why being effective and efficient at the same time is powerful is that, sure, look, I don't have a 4-hour work week. My work week maybe looks more like 30 hours, right?
Yeah.
However, I used to be the person that does 80 hours.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And now that I do 30, I'm working 30 and I'm living 50.
Yeah.
Whereas before I was working 80 and I was living maybe 10. And then, you kind of lie to yourself and you say, oh, look, I'm doing all of this hard work and this volume of work because it's for my family. It's for my children. This is me talking about me. And then after a while, it's like, well, you're working for your family, but you're not living with your family. And it's a whole thing when my wife, Pei Wen, sat me down last year and said, you've worked so hard to build this beautiful garden, but then you're never in this garden. And as a result, we'd rather a crappy garden, but actually have you in it. Yeah. Whereas you got so obsessed about building this abundant, beautiful, exotic flower garden, but you're not even here. So we don't care about it, and that was a big reality check for me.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think it feels like this is something that's happening more and more, especially in the world of high performance, in the corporate world and the professional world. Like I think COVID's probably highlighted this a fair bit too, where people that are now working from home or experiencing a little bit more flexibility in their working life, they're maybe getting the realization that, wow, commuting 2 hours every single day, sitting inside the office, potentially isolated for 9 hours. There's an alternative method, and hopefully we'll see that a lot more, especially in the traditional working sense where people maybe move towards hybrid models or remote models. But I think that what this book really helped me with was it changed the thinking around work-life balance to more, how do you integrate it all? Because for me, it's not about how do you work 4 hours a week, because I think that that I didn't really find that satisfying. Like I went down that path of how do you hack so you only have to work 4 hours a week. But the flip side of that is usually detachment from what you're doing as well. Like if you have a traditional job and you're the only one working 4 hours a week, but everyone else is working 50, you probably won't get the connection with your employees or with your team members or with your colleagues. If you've got a business and you're only doing 4 hours a week in that, at some point you'll get detached from that. You won't be as connected with it. But it's more around how to use the principles in this so that the things that you are working on or focusing on are the most aligned. And how do you then match that up with what you're about and what you're passionate about and what your skill set's about, rather than just doing, I love that term, doing work for work's sake. Like That would be the biggest takeaway for me. And if anyone's new to this concept, is have a look at how you're spending your week, your time, your hours, and what out of that is just work for work's sake, where inherently you know that there probably isn't all that much effectiveness in it.
Well, let's talk about why we work for work's sake. The reason we work for work's sake is because, traditional bosses and employees, when you go into a job, they look at it as, well, you've got to be there from 9 till 5.
Yep.
Even if you were able to do your work, you finished your work in the first 4 hours, well, you've got to look busy. So what people have learned how to do is people have learned how to look busy, or even worse, people have learned how to become less efficient so that their work takes them longer. And again, it's because traditionally we just believe that if the employee or the person working for you is there from 9 till 5, they're doing more work. Yeah. And look, that's work for work's sake. It's because of the way we perceive work, and how employers and employees perceive that value transaction is, if you're here from 9 till 5, that's what I want. And that's why a huge part of the book, Tim Ferriss gives you so many different strategies so that you can, start working remotely, working from home. So I think during this pandemic, I think a lot of people who have actually worked at home have realized that I can actually be more effective at home and more efficient at home. So I'm actually only working 4 or 5 hours a day, not 8. And that's why they're enjoying it more.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the enjoyment is not just being in the comfort of your own home. I think the enjoyment actually comes from you're not burdened by that eagle eye boss watching you going, are you doing the 8 hours? And you've let go of the notion of, or you've let go of the habit of looking busy.
Yeah, 100%. And it's such a big shift in the mentality because, as you said there, people are used to paying for minutes, for hours. Or 40 hours for 20 hours, fractional, right? Like the whole traditional working landscape is based on an annual salary, which is broken down into months or fortnights. And, outside of, say, the gig economy and freelancing and stuff like that, where you're paid more per project or per outcome, that shift is still very much in its early stages of how do you design roles, jobs, tasks that are more outcome-based versus here's the hourly rate, here's the day rate, here's your weekly rate, and I think that just comes down to simplicity, right? Like the system is set up for that other option a lot more, but is it the most effective? Who knows?
Well, I still remember this core moment where, when I read this book and then I started trying to apply some of the lessons and you do the 80-20 and you go, there's so many different forms of marketing that I can engage in. And, I can go have meetings and coffees with people, but it takes 30 minutes to get there, 45 minutes for the coffee and then 30 minutes to get home. And then when I worked out my most effective ways of marketing, a lot of it was just, social media, email marketing. Yeah. And what would normally take me a few days to get through, I remember finishing it in like 2 hours. And I did 2 hours of work and all my marketing for this project I was doing was done. And then I freaked out. I started filling my time after that and then again, keeping busy because the behavioral habit of working for work's sake was so ingrained in me that I don't think I was able to get rid of that behavioral kind of mindset for a long time. Like now, I big plug for Vinh, but I'm running a virtual masterclass in October. And to me, yesterday I did marketing for it. It took me about 45 minutes. So I did the marketing for it. 45 minutes later, I was done. And I went, this is fantastic. I was very, effective today. I was super efficient today. And I just went inside and did other stuff like life stuff. Whereas I'm proud of that now. But before I would have been like, you bastard, you lazy piece of crap, and then I would kind of talk very negatively to myself because I wasn't busy for the rest of the day.
Yeah. And that's probably a really big thing. So when you made that shift from being the hustle mentality to more of the effectiveness or the 80-20 mentality.
Yeah. Share
some of the feelings that you felt like when you were trying to make that move.
Well, first of all, again, you hear, your dad's voice or your mum's voice in your head, why you not work the more hour, huh? What the hell? And like, it's just, I have an Asian voice in my head that comes consistently.
I wish I had one too.
Yeah. No, you should have one. Why don't you have one?
No, but I want your dad's voice. Like,
you know what, the Indian one?
Yeah, your one's way better.
Yeah. It's like the broken English. I love it. It's fantastic. No, but I think I felt shame. I felt like I felt like I was slacking. I felt like I was being lazy. I felt like I just felt so many different negative emotions. And I think the biggest one was that disappointment. Not working 10 hours or 12 hours a day made me feel an overwhelming sense of, I felt disappointed in myself, and I couldn't and then when I spent time with my wife, I felt guilty.
Yeah.
So for me, it was feeling like I always felt guilty for not working. And just for clarity's sake as well, I just want to say that I'm not good at living. Like, I'm learning how to get better at living. I've spent 30 plus years of my life learning how to work really well and be really efficient, but I've only spent the last few years learning how to be effective and actually living life.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because one of the things this book talks about that I think is very powerful is that, I mean, you look at the default script we're given when we're born. Okay, so you're born. Okay, well, the first part of your life, children, is education. The second part of your life is in a ridiculous amount of work as hard as you can, the hustle mentality. Try to do it up until you're 65 at least. And then you'll have a whole bucket load of money. Then you retire. I think the majority of us still believe that and live in this way. Whereas the most interesting question in this book that Tim Ferriss kind of poses is, he says, what if retirement wasn't an option?
Yeah.
What if there's no retirement? What if there was no point at which you completely stopped working? How would that change the way you view life? Yeah. So how did that change the way you viewed life?
Yeah, for 100%. Like, I think even just from a young age, I've always struggled with traditional concepts. Like, even I remember being like 5, 6 years old and wondering why as a 5 or 6 year old do I have to go to school for 35 hours a week? Like, it didn't logically make all that much sense to me.
You thought that at that age.
Yeah. I remember thinking from pretty much primary school, I'd have fights with my mum about going to school. I just didn't understand why this was a thing that we had to do. Like, logically, it just didn't make all that much sense. I'm like, well, maybe 1 or 2 days works, but I'm awake. Like, I wasn't thinking about it to this level like I do now when I look at it with our kids, even though they do go to school and my wife's a school teacher, so I can't really share these views at home. But I'm like why are we making children learn so many of these things that they can't even apply or utilize right now? And then that sort of just kept exacerbating, like even in high school and uni and work. It's like, well, why do we need to do this 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week in the office and do these meetings and talk about these certain things that don't seem to actually fit with what the main goal and the vision is? So that kind of thinking was always there a little bit. Like, the whole concept of retirement blew my mind. It just, again, logically didn't make sense. It's like, why would we work for 40 years to enjoy life when we're 65? Like, that's essentially what that concept is saying, right? It's like, just work, get it all there, and then you can have a break in 40 years' time. Like, that doesn't make all that much sense. Like, I don't know, to me, it didn't anyway. And that was just more my sort of value alignment or whatever it was at that point. But I think what the book kind of showed is that there is an alternative method that you can apply, because this was the thing. Outside of, say, this type of thinking, and call it more lifestyle designy or this alternative non-traditional work thinking that maybe started 10, 15 years ago when technology kind of came into play. Option A was pretty much the only option you had. Like, it was either you do the traditional work or you're unemployed. There wasn't really much else outside of that. Have we lost Vin for a second? I think we might have. He's gone frozen, but while we get Vin back, just if you have read this book, I know we've got comments turned on at Vin's side. So put in your thoughts if you have read the book. Like, let us know what you're thinking about this chat, and if there's any topics within the book that you would like us to discuss as well or cover. You back, bro?
Good cover. Good cover. Nice. I need to get an Ethernet cable to plug in. I'm still relying on the Wi-Fi here. Yeah, well, good. Well, I heard I knew the direction you were going.
Yeah.
And I just really feel like the whole, see, for you, it felt unnatural, right? For you, you had that innate feeling that this doesn't feel right. For me, I was taught this. I saw everyone around me basically follow this formula of work really hard and then enjoy when you're 65. So to me, it made sense. To me, I was like, oh, well, that's the only kind of logic I've been taught. So to me, I guess that's what I'll do too.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, but when you think about it, it really, I don't think makes any sense. Oh man, the craziest thing about last week was, I remember I was chatting to one of my best friends, Lenny. Yeah. We were just texting. And then he sent me this photo, a screenshot he took of a Facebook post. And there was someone we knew from high school that had just died. And, you know, we knew her name was Jo. And we're like, oh man, what the hell? Like, she's an ultra marathon runner and she just passed away in her sleep. And it freaked me out. You know, it made me feel so sad because she's such a good spirit, but then we were never that close. But then what made me feel even more sad was that, imagine you followed that journey of working your ass off and not allowing yourself to enjoy in your mid 60s. And then you go at 55 or you go at 33. It means you've never lived.
Yeah.
So I think that's such a dangerous way of living. Yeah. It's a very risky way of living.
I agree. I can't remember what book it's from, but one of the decision-making sort of questions, and I love sort of system thinking, right? Or decision-making models that are easy to use. And this one was, if you've got a decision or you're weighing up an option, a really good question to ask yourself is, would I regret doing or not doing this on my deathbed? You know, because I think that puts it in perspective. It's like, is this thing worth doing now? Because in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years time, when I look back on this moment, will I regret making or not making that decision? And I remember when I read that concept, it was a pretty big game changer in terms of shifting away from, call it work from work's sake, or just doing things that were obligatory. You know, like, of course, in life, we've got things that we have to do. Like, that's just a given. I don't think that you can ever get it to full 100% freedom, or if you do, it will be unsatisfying anyway. But that concept of, especially the bigger ones, or maybe if there's things in your life that you're weighing up that you're not really sure about, using those systems of, is it a hell yeah? If not, it's a hell no, like Derek Sivers' version of that quote. You know, will I regret this if I do it or don't do it? Well, what's the longer term upside if I make this decision versus the longer term downside? Like, can I recover from it? Like, I think those types of questions and tools can be really helpful for people that are keen to maybe make a shift or to change some of those things in their life.
And you know when I think about the whole, what if there was no retirement? What if there's no such thing as retirement? How would you plan your life differently?
Yeah.
That question in the book, when I read it, it was right above another section that I found to be very insightful. And it was that we tend to avoid looking at our lives by saying, oh, I just need to make more money, right? You know, if I make more money, then everything will be fine. Everything will work itself out and it's all going to be okay. And we all play that game. You probably play this game. I know I play this game a lot. And I know a lot of the listeners who are listening, I know you play this game. Don't even try to deny it. And we always tend to go, look, instead of addressing the problems of how I want to live and what kind of life I want, I'll just focus on making more money. And that's an illusion that we all play. It's a game that we all play. So then it's harder to play the different game, because when you stop thinking that more money is going to solve everything, it forces you, especially the question of what if there's no retirement, it then forces you to analyze your own life and how you want to live. And the brain experiment they did in the book, which I thought was fantastic, was here's $100 million. Okay, great. You've got the $100 million in your bank account. What will you do with your time now? What are you going to do? Yeah. So, let's test ourselves out. I mean, I haven't thought about this really. You've got $100 million in your account, Ali, and what will you do with your life?
Yeah, well,
what would you do?
That's such a great game-changing question. I remember doing that exercise, and it's funny, it hasn't changed that much probably from the first time that I read the book. And when I actually break down the things that I would do if money was never an option, they're so simple. It's like read a book, play a round of golf, go for a walk, like spend time with friends, go to the cafe. Like they're not like things like buy a $50 million house or anything for me personally, like and that was such a game-changing realization when I looked at it like that, because you're right. It's just a psychological shift where we think that, I need X thousands of dollars a year or whatever it is to be happy. I need a mortgage and a house to be happy. I need to have a big wedding to be happy. I need all these things that are, call it societal norms, that have just been, that are traditionally there. But for most individuals that I've spoken to that have done that similar exercise, it's like 5 to 7 things. And they generally don't equal above $100 million. Like I haven't met anyone yet that's like, no, wait, 100 mil is not enough. Like I actually I'll probably need about 500 or a bill to do the stuff that I need to do. And if you do, awesome. Like Bezos, I think when somebody asked him this question, he's like, I need a trill. But yeah, I'd say for the majority of people, it's interesting. What about you? What are yours?
Well, similar thing. I think you hit something really profound there. But I want to be really transparent with with our audience. All 17 of them. I want to be transparent in that I know that more money doesn't make me happier. I know that material possessions don't make me happier. But like Ali, I can tell you now, since coming back from the US, I almost, I say once every 2 days, I go to a site called carsales.com.au. And then I just feel this because my brain is telling me, Vin, I know that, you're feeling some kind of void in yourself right now. And you, in your brain, you think to yourself that, but if Vin, if you get this car, it's going to be good. It's going to be great, man. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to be good. It's going to be a hit. And then, and again, like my dad is very Zen-like. So he goes, no, get the Toyota. So reliable. So the good. Like the Camry, get the Camry. So, but it's like, reading this book has made me again become more conscious of me always trying to go, but if you get this next contract, if you get this next project, you're going to be fine. And I got to tell you that I still find myself kind of hovering around this trap, going, should I jump in? Should I just do it? Should I just do it? But then I have enough control to say, don't jump into this trap. But I'm always hanging around the trap.
What's the car? Maybe there's a sponsor that's listening right now, and you'll just get one delivered to you.
I'm not even going to say it. I don't even want to give this airtime. No,
that's hilarious. But I think that's natural, right? Like, people will want
it is. Things. I mean, surely it is.
Like
right?
We want things. Like I've tried it. I've gone the whole, like, all right, what does, like in the book, I think it talks about it, like what does the simple, very minimalistic life, like the stoic kind of, one piece of clothing, very simple food, simple lifestyle. Like what does that look like? Like you can go to that side, which is the more monk-like existence, which is at one end of the spectrum where you literally, you detach yourself from anything material, which is perfect if that's what aligns with you. Or you can go the other end where you're motivated by buying your family the biggest bloody house in your suburb or whatever it is. Like that's fine too. But I think it's more around alignment with who you are and what you're about. And then how can you design that with your life where you're using, call it time, which is to me the most valuable resource. Like how can you do that so that you're not sacrificing your entire life experience and the time that you have and it's in opposition with what you're actually truly about. Like, to me, that's where the core of the truth of this lies. And that's maybe what the book provides people with. It's like, it's not about working a 4-hour work week. It's like, how do you just make your life a little bit more aligned with who you are so that you don't have to compartmentalize, you know, your family, your work, your hobbies, your passions, your friends, whatever it is, and give everyone an allocation. Like, is there a way where you can make it a little bit more fluid and then combine them all? That's kind of what fundamentally, as an operating system, what books like that have provided me with, that I've found really valuable.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it kind of ties back into two things we spoke about earlier on, right? As you learn to be more effective and more efficient, you'll have more time to be able to live. And then I guess the word that Tim Ferriss introduced me to that, you know, I know you believe in a lot is lifestyle design. Is again, if you take retirement out of the equation, it means you look at your life as just one big thing now, as opposed to going work, enjoy, right?
Yeah.
And normally when you're enjoying at 65, I mean, is it really enjoying? I mean, I think the saddest thing that you know he wrote about in the book that he was kind of taking the piss on, and also for my American viewers, taking the piss is teasing. That's what it means, not literally urinating. But what he, I remember in the US, I kept saying taking the piss, and people were like, is he going
to do it on stage?
Yeah, like, is he doing it now? Sick.
Like these Australians.
but the thing that Tim Ferriss was taking the piss on is the really old man, the really old fat man in the red BMW, right? Is that, you know, we tend to work our entire kind of youthful life where we have the most energy, the most abundance in terms of, you know, again, energy and vitality, etc. And we use all of that time just building wealth. And that there's that common saying where, you know, most people will spend their time building wealth and then at the end of their life, use that wealth to try to regain the health that they had.
Yeah.
And look, there's a fable. I have to read to you on. I'm sure you're aware of this fable.
Yeah.
But the fable essentially is this kind of really successful American kind of entrepreneur. And then he went out.
Love it.
Yeah. He went out to this Mexican village because he was forced to take a week off, and he took a week off, went out to the Mexican village, and he saw this Mexican fisherman, and he fished for a couple of hours, bought a few beautiful yellow tuna fishes in, and the fishes were delicious. And he said, why don't you go out and fish for longer to get more fish, and you could sell it and make more money? And he goes, oh, well, because, you know, I want to come home. I want to go dancing with my wife. I want to go into the city with my amigos and play music. And I want to spend time with my children and go for beautiful walks. But the American kind of MBA guy was like, no, you shouldn't. No, you could hire people. You could go out. You could work longer. Then we could build the right infrastructure, and then we could, you know, have a supply chain, and then we could expand and go to Los Angeles because the fish there isn't that good, and we could expand to New York. And then while he's telling the guy this, he goes, and then you know what you can do after that? After you've done that and you've put away $10-20 million, then, and as he's saying it, it's like he realizes it. He goes, and then you can dance with your wife and go into town and play music with your amigos and spend time with your children and go for long walks.
Yeah.
And it was such a profound story. It's because
that's impressive. I'm so glad you covered that.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have.
Nah, I wouldn't have been able to remember the story and retell it like that. No, I love it.
But the thing is, I think that's the trap we all fall into, that I fall into. Like you said it so beautifully before, Ali, and that the things we'd do if we had $100 million in the account is I'd love to cook for my friends. I'd love to learn new dishes to be able to cook for them. I'd love to be able to sit like you. I mean, you and I have spent time together in New York, and what do? We go for a leisurely stroll together as we read a book in Central Park.
Yeah.
Like, it's not extravagant.
Nah.
And what that means is we're playing a game with ourselves that's not real. We're playing this game where we go, no, we have to hold off on enjoyment. Whereas so many of the things that will give you a peak experience now, that can make you enjoy life now, that you seem to think, I have to be a millionaire until I can do that. No, you can do it now. And see, I'm preaching this, but I still don't always do it.
Yes.
It's so annoying.
Yeah. It's,
damn it.
You've 100% Nailed it. Like it's true. And that's the hardest thing is it still oscillates. Like I don't think you can get this completely perfect, because if you're just sitting there just reading a book every day, there'll be that part of your brain that will just say that we need to go do something that's, productive or whatever it is. Like there's always a trade-off when you go to one end of the extreme is, as we always say, it's like working yourself back to the middle and then oscillating on both sides of the extremes. But one of the big ones on this is like the question that often gets asked is, say if you are in the traditional mindset, like how do you use the principles within this book to get out of that rat race or the cycle or whatever it is? And it's funny, like I've just looked at the comments here. I think Betty's asked this exact question. It's how do you actually get out of it? How do you transition? So I know you were in the corporate world prior to starting your career, and I was the same. Maybe let's freestyle.
No, actually, I never really worked in the corporate world, brother. I mean, I did work. I did work experience. Yeah, I did working. I mean, it's work experience. I didn't even get like money really. So
you read the book and transitioned really quickly. You're like, I've got 2 weeks of work experience. I'm out. Like,
well, again, this is why I think reading is important, because when I did read this book, it shocked the crap out of me. It was like a shock to my system. And I think a lot of the times, sorry for jumping in first and kind of grabbing the mic on this one, but I think the people you spend time with is a huge part of the solution. Because if everyone you spend time with still believes in 9 to 5, and look, I'm not kind of saying it's a terrible thing. Look, you do what you do, you, right? You do what you fancy. But if you spend time with everyone that kind of believes in that model and is a part of that model, then when you try to leave that framework or that model, then they're going to obviously go, are you sure you want to do this? Look, I just want to say, Ali, I think if you do this, you have children, you've got a mortgage. I think this is very dangerous. So then guess what? You're not going to do it. Whereas if you spend time with people who have transitioned out of that successfully, I have to say this. When I wanted to become a magician in the Vietnamese community, I remember I had a partner at the time, an ex-partner at the time, and her parents did not agree with my decision. They said, look, this is really irresponsible. But not only my ex-partner, her parents said this, but also my entire Vietnamese community was kind of looking down on this, because in that community, guess what they said to me? Every time I said I wanted to do this, they said, it's impossible. And I was like, really? Is it really? I mean, do magicians exist? Yes, it's possible. But they're like, no, but it's impossible for you. And I remember the moment I changed environments and I spent more time with entrepreneurs, I mean, they said 3 words, and I remember it just breaking me down, because my entire life I lived in an environment where they kept saying it's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible. Changed environment, said 3 words, this is how. And I was like, what? What do you mean this is how?
That's big.
And just that alone changed the game for me. So first thing I would say is environment plays a huge factor.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's that just from a mindset perspective is massive. See, I was probably fortunate in the sense that, I'm an only child, and my mum's always been quite a free spirit. So her thing's always has been like, look, you just do whatever you need to do, which is kind of the opposite from traditionally ethnic family. So the flip side of that was zero structure though. Right. So I had to build, so the flip side, you could go again. It's like the opposite end scale of hardcore pressure and expectation. I nearly had it on the other end where there was like zero expectation, no pressure. So you have very little discipline, very little routine structure, because you're kind of developing it yourself. But I think going back to the mindset component of this is, because that's the biggest thing, is fear. Fear kicks in straight away. And there's a great exercise in the book, like it's a fear setting exercise within there where, it gets you to ask some questions to yourself around, all right, well, what's the best case scenario if I make this decision? What's the worst case scenario if I make this decision? What will be the upside? Can I recover? Because they're the big things, especially transitioning away from work, is I think everyone's biggest fear is I've worked so hard to get this job or this employment, And the internal fear is, if I make this change, I will be a failure. I will never ever get a job as good as this. I was lucky to get this job. Like imposter syndrome will kick in. And I think it's a really hard one to advise on because you don't know everyone's individual situations. And it's also based on things like economic factors, right? Like say, for example, in the middle of a pandemic, is it the best decision to hand in your resignation and go start a business? Who knows? Maybe not. Like it might be better, like especially if you're thinking about starting a travel business or an events-based business or something like that. It's probably not sound advice to do that right now. See, each individual needs to sort of weigh that up with what they're comfortable with and their risk profile. But I think one of the big things that everyone can start doing, like based on that question of how do you get out of the rat race, is can you carve off a component of your time to try and test something that's outside of that? Or can you redesign your current job or your role so it better aligns with the lifestyle that you want? And the book, again, gives pretty good practical tips on how to do that. Like, can you negotiate working one day from home and then you work really well every day? You work twice as hard on that one day that you're working from home and you communicate all the wins that you're doing. So maybe then you can negotiate 2 days working from home or whatever that looks like. Or can you renegotiate your role so that you're doing things that are more aligned with where your value best sits? Like there's some of the little practical things that I think can help because it also helps you negotiate high salaries and better conditions. So
something worth mentioning that I thought was really brilliant was that if you just become more efficient at work and more effective, and let's say you 2x'd your output and you did it in 4 hours, then the natural thing at work is they're going to say, well, you still got another 4 hours at work, so you should like 4x it or 8x it.
For sure.
So like it's never ending. Like they'll just ask for more efficiency, more efficiency, more efficiency. The powerful thing that Tim Ferriss shares is that just ask for 1 day to work at home or take 2 sick days, still work from home and be 2 times as productive, and then go back to work and say, hey, I know I took the sick days, but I still worked and I did my full hours and I still worked as well. And then they'll look at the results and make sure, you have key indicators that showed your effectiveness and your efficiency. And then when they review it, they go, oh, okay, so Sally worked from home, but still 3x to outcome. That kind of then plants the seed of, hey, look, maybe, you can play the surprise character and go, oh, I didn't know that as well. I guess the commute time and I was in the zone. Can I try this just once a week or once a fortnight? And again, you can stop me from doing this anytime. You can kind of veto it anytime. And again, the book gives very pragmatic kind of steps as to how to do this. I need to dive into something you said a bit before that we need to go a little bit deeper on. I think we just touched it and then we left, but it was a good nugget. Worst case scenario planning. We overdo the worst case scenario in our brains. When you actually write the worst case scenario, so say for me, for example, I was, I used to be in accounting a long time ago when I was in work experience. But to me, my worst case scenario that I played in my head was, oh, if I leave this career path, my whole life will be ruined. I'll never be able to go back into accounting. My dad's probably going to abandon me, make me give up my last name, Giang. My worst case scenario was so dramatic. But when I wrote down my worst case scenario through this exercise, my worst case scenario was, you left accounting and you tried to do a different career path. You tried that for 3 years. You failed. You're probably in a little bit of debt, maybe, $100,000. That's cool. Oh, wait, I can just go back to accounting.
Yeah.
And I went, let's go more dramatic. My job before I got into the accounting kind of place was I was working at a petrol station. I was making like $26 an hour working night shifts, right? So I was like, wait, that's not that bad. But my bad, because I think in my mind was I'd be dead on the streets.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I overdid it. And when you actually write down your worst case scenario, you then realize it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So I think that's another really good exercise.
Well, I think one of the big questions is like, are the chances of me dying very high? When you plan out that worst case scenario, because with work, that's like, say with skydiving, it might change a little bit. Like it's still not that high, but it's a consideration. But quitting your job,
not do it.
or leaving your job, like, is there any path forward that's on the other side. Like I remember when I was making the transition from traditional work to the business, it's like, well, if this, like one of the most practical things is you sit down and you make a list of all your expenses. And then you can even go down as far as, well, am I living in too expensive a suburb? Can I live in a smaller house? Can I move in with my parents? Can I share a place? Like all these things that we view that are really fixed might not actually be all that fixed. Can I move to a different country where living expenses are cheaper and work remotely? Like there are all these different tools and tactics, but a lot of it can be driven by the baseline of your expenses. And I think it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there are certain things that have to be met, right? Like food, shelter, clothing, you've got a baseline. And I think generally, like when they do the studies, it's that whole thing around when people generally earn above, I think it's the equivalent of 50,000 US dollars or 50,000 Australian dollars a year. The level of happiness doesn't incrementally increase as you start
diminishing returns.
A lot more. Yeah, it's like diminishing returns after that because the basic needs are ultimately met. So that exercise of saying, all right, what are your actual expenses and getting really meticulous and, granular with what they are and categorizing them, like, are these essential? And then going the next step, it's like, all right, well then how much would it cost me? There's an exercise in the book again. Like what's my monthly desired income that I need to live the lifestyle? Like for me to go and read books, play a round of golf, do a few of the things that I want in my life, what does that cost per month? And when you start getting that clarity around the financials, it might make the other things a little bit easier. Because I remember when I was making the shift, I had it fixed in my head that I can only go and fully focus on my own business when I'm earning the equivalent or close to it from the business. Now, that's going to be very unlikely for a lot of people when they go into the startup world or into a passion type of business world or a freelance world, if they've got the backing and the security of a corporate job. But when I started shifting the thinking, instead of not what am I currently worth in the marketplace and what have I built myself up the ladder for, but what is it that I actually need as a baseline for our family? It was about 1/4 of what I thought it was that I actually required. Wow. And then you've got freedom to play on the upside when you're doing the alternative thing, whatever that might be. For some it will be starting a business. For some it might be working for a charity or an organization that they're more aligned with, whatever that is. Like, I think that exercise is super valuable if you are looking at making the shift because it will remove the fear of financial insecurity potentially. A little bit more.
Remember, the reason we're resistant to these type of exercises is because this is deep self-examination. And I think naturally we avoid these things because, dude, this is hard work.
Yep.
And there's kind of a fear involved too, that if I actually sit down and work these things out and then it actually becomes possible, well, now I actually have to do it. So I think there's a fear involved there too. We get used to the patterns that we fall into, right? And I think it's hard. I mean, I remember this was a very hard exercise to do, to really look at reality for reality and not look at reality through the lens of the way I perceive things because of my culture, because of my circle. Yeah. I mean, look, so thank you for that question, Betty. That led us down a wonderful rabbit hole. So thank you for that. But I also feel like what's important to mention here is the whole idea of relative income, right? What you touched there was what Tim Ferriss talks about, relative income. So, you could have Monique making $100,000 and Xavier making $50,000. Traditionally, who's wealthier? Oh, fantastic. I mean, why use John and Joe? I mean, let's create some better names. So Monique making $100,000 and Xavier making $50,000, for example. Traditionally, we would think Monique is wealthier. Right. But we don't know that Monique has to work 80 hours a week. And then when you divide that out, she's making $25 an hour, for example. Or whereas Xavier, he's making $50,000 a year. However, he's only working 10 hours a week, which is $100 per hour. So when you look at relative income, Xavier is 4 times richer than Monique.
Yep.
And I think, in the book, they talk a lot about the new rich, right? Yeah. That the way the new rich perceive wealth is not just in quantity of money. It's what you're doing to make that money, and also how much of the time you're actually spending living, right? I think that's because wealth comes in so many forms. I think wealth is, there's happiness, there's fulfillment, there's financial wealth. Like, I didn't know there were so many banks in life. I thought the only bank that existed was the financial bank. I didn't realize there was a happiness bank. There was a love bank, the contribution bank. There's so many different banks. Whereas I think a lot of the times we live as if there's only one bank that exists, the financial bank.
It's profound. It's true. Yeah, because it's the most measurable and it's the most comparable.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's the other thing, that psychological comparison against your peer group or the network is something that's so embedded, and that's what happens from a school age. It's like, I got an A. What? You got a C. I'm better than you. Oh, you earn X amount. Oh, blah, blah, blah earns this amount. Why don't you earn that amount? And you do the same thing. It's that whole thing. It's like, that house is that big. I need a bigger house. That person spent this much on their wedding. I need to spend that much on the wedding. Right. And it's so
measurable.
It's a psychological trap because you can measure it with quantity, right? Like when somebody says that they put a number on it, like my car is worth that much. It's a lot more quantifiable than you saying, well, I'm an 85% happiness all the time versus like you can't measure that much. Like it's a really, really hard thing to do, or like whether it's health or mindfulness or whatever it is. Like, and those things are getting a little bit more measurable now. But I think that you touched on it earlier when you're looking at the people that you surround yourself with and your peer group. And I think Tim Ferriss talks about it in there as well. Like ultimately people just want to feel good about themselves. There's that deep desire internally, and that's what work does. And that's the flip side of what lifestyle design does, because if you're working 4 hours a week and all your friends are working 80 hours a week and you're the only one sipping lattes at the cafe while everyone's out at work, there isn't alignment or congruency on that side. So then you will feel uncomfortable because now you've left your peer group and you've done something a little bit outside of that. So I think that's a really important concept with this when you make those changes.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well by saying that I remember one piece of advice I remember hearing from one of my early mentors, and he said that if the only benefit you're getting from your job is a paycheck, that's not enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the financial reward is one of the rewards. You should be trying to upskill, experience, growth, fulfillment. There's so much more you could get from your job, not just the financial reward. And like that always stuck with me. I always thought, wow, that's so cool. You tend to think of a job, for me when I was young, the only thing that linked to a job was the dollar amount.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what will make me choose this job over that job is the dollar amount. I didn't realize there were so many other things I could get from my career, from my job.
Yep. Yeah. I remember hearing I can't remember, it was a speaker at maybe uni or soon after it. And he said, he's like, well, by the time you're 50, how many paychecks will you truly remember?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, because it took you 50 hours every week to get that paycheck. Like how many of those are memorable? Do you have any photos of it? Will you have it posted up on your wall? Are there fond experiences? And I think that's but what you will remember is, were you working on something meaningful? Were you working with a team that you really enjoyed? Were you doing things that you loved? Or was the work that you were doing, did it help you do things for your family? Because I don't think you necessarily have to love your job. Like I know we're pretty big proponents of it because we've aligned ourselves with it. But I do think there is a flip side where you can go do your work and work is just a part of your life that helps support other things. But I think it's more so when are you hating your job, you're overworking for it, but then you're not enjoying anything outside of it. That's probably the bigger concept, right? Because for me, if family was the number one thing in my life, it wouldn't matter if I was, doing whatever the vocation was. It wouldn't really then matter then, because whatever it was to support my family, or it's to play golf on the weekend or whatever that was like. That's another alternative that also works. Just for context,
look,
I think we can romanticize this notion, and for a lot of people, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable that how do you go from where I am today to this? Because there is it's funny. There's so much hard work is required to get closer to living in alignment with the 4-hour work week. It's not as simple as just making a change. Like it might take 3 years or 2 years or 5 years to move yourself into that position. But it's more so, is that a mountain you're willing to climb? It's funny. It's like you're climbing a mountain so you have longer term freedom and flexibility, but it just won't happen by turning on a switch.
Well, the first time I read the book, I read it for what are all the switches I can turn on. So the first time I read this book, it was purely for all the pragmatic strategies that I could apply. And now reading it again at this stage in my life, I'm like, well, no, actually, this book is a book that teaches you how to build a life that you love. And then work is not do the job you love. It's live the life you love. And your work is just a part of life. Whereas I've lived my life for a long time looking at work as work is life. And then life's this other it's a little side dish. Life is just a side dish. Whereas now work has become the side dish and life has become the main.
Yeah.
So reading it through the second time, I'm like, cool, these strategies in the middle of the book, sure, all these strategies are fantastic, but it's given me a more overall shift in the way that I live. I want to have a life that is more exciting, that I look at it as a whole now, as opposed to kind of compartmentalize things that, I'm looking at life as a whole in terms of my entire life as a whole. And you're right, in that process takes time. It takes a lot of time to work out because this is a process of self-discovery. Maybe you've done what I've done and you've just spent your entire life going, I'm going to work for this whole chunk of time and then I'll relax and discover who I am. I've done that for a big part of my life. So now I'm going through the process of self-discovery going, well, now that I have time, now that I kind of finished that marketing activity in like an hour or 2 hours, what should I go do now? And now I'm finding myself discovering parts about me that I've never discovered before. And it's actually kind of painful starting that process because I found myself sitting there going, I don't know what to do. And then when you don't know what to do, it's so easy to then go, oh, well, if I don't know what to do, the next best thing is I should go and just work for work's sake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, it's so easy to just fall back into that.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that I really found from the principles in this book, and, we've done it and we've talked about this stuff a lot, is how do you then plan your life and develop a life strategy and that life design? And it's hilarious because you're using very similar principles to business planning and business strategizing. But I wonder, even for people out there, like how many people have actually done it with their life? Like where you go through that same process of setting out a vision and finding out your values and what your key KPIs and outcomes are for the year and how are your action plan getting them, what bits are important. Like, because you can even break life down in terms of departments. It's like you've got family and connection and time and money and things or whatever it is, finances, like you can break it down that granular. And it's quite an interesting exercise when you go through that in full and you start realizing how big a part traditional work and finances and business and money makes up, but also how small a part it makes in the bigger scheme of things when you look at the things that are really important to people, where it comes down to, and usually that lies in connection and growth or memorable moments. That's like,
well, I mean, I'll share what happened with me last year. So for me in 2019, it was probably the peak of my career as a keynote speaker, as a thought leader who was, I was traveling all around the US, and Ali joined me for part of that as well. We kind of flew around together around the United States. And again, it was the peak of my career, but I remember it was the shittest I've felt in my life. And it was so weird. It was this point of life where I had achieved so much, but I never realized the lesson till really deeply last year that I was completely living out of alignment with my values. And that wasn't apparent until I remember calling you, Ali. And I remember this, I called you and I spoke to you and it was crazy. This just goes to show how beautiful a friend you are. But you just heard my voice and you said, I haven't heard you like this before. I'll see you next Friday. I'm coming over. And you flew over and Ali met with me in New York. And this will be, one of the things I'll remember for the rest of my life. And, you flew from Melbourne, Australia to New York. I met you in New York. And I again, at the peak of my career, I flew into New York from a series of gigs and I was a broken man. I just felt broken inside. And Ali took me through a beautiful process of getting me to map out my values. I've lived 30 plus years of my life, and I never sat down to identify, what are my values? Like, what are they? What do they look like? I had all these things that I kept in my head, values, and I had intentions of, this is what I wanted to do with my wife. This is what I wanted to do with my son. But none of these things were mapped out, written down anywhere. And I've got here on my iPad, like, you helped me map out my life. And through mapping out that process, why I became so severely unhappy became abundantly clear. I was unhappy because I was, think of it as, you've got 5 buckets, family, work, wealth creation, all these different buckets in your life. I was only focusing on filling up one bucket, and it was the bucket of wealth creation. That's the only bucket I focused on. And I was like, why am I feeling? And it was funny because for me at the time, Ali, I was like, I have no idea why I'm unhappy. It's just it's unbelievable. I don't even know why. And it just became so painfully clear the moment you helped me map out my values, took me through the painful process of calling me out on my bullshit. You say you value this, but really, you bastard, because I think you don't. Having that clarity, Ali, for the last 12 months of my life has been incredible. The happiness that I feel now, wow, is night and day as to where I was. Externally, people probably perceived me last year to, wow, you're so happy. Sure, I was abundant. I was successful in my career and I was making money. But man, inside I was falling apart. Maybe you can talk a little bit through the process of life design. Maybe you can talk through the process you took me through. And I know it's a big process, but maybe let's talk a bit about it.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, man, I think it's awesome sharing that. And it's so cool to see that, it has led to more balance and alignment and happiness because, I think just from books like this, that process nearly happened organically for me because I always struggled with like motivation and understanding the point of things. It's like, well, why should we go? Like I mentioned it earlier in the show, it's like, why do we have to go to work and do this? Like I hated that feeling of struggling to wake up in the morning because you don't know the point of why you're doing that. And I don't know if any other people can relate to that or not, but I remember feeling it in school when I was working, like so many times where it's like, oh, I just don't want to face this day again because internally I couldn't figure out why I was doing it and what I
think a lot of people can relate to this. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I wanted to figure out a solution to that was practical. So that's when that journey started. It's like, well, how do you design a life that aligns with who you are so you don't have to feel that anymore, or at least limit the feelings of that where, you actually are enjoying what you're doing and then just sort of testing it on myself in terms of, all right, well, you just start breaking everything down. Like, what is it that I love in my relationships? What is it that I love in the people that are around me? What is it that I love with the way that, the hobbies that I'm doing? What are the parts of my job or my role that I actually enjoy, where I add value, where I've got a skill set that's, aligned with who I am? So it started slowly like that. And then just always writing it down and trying to get more clarity around, who I was. And then obviously when, like you were the first person, like that wasn't a process that was designed. Like it kind of happened organically, custom built based on the situation that you were kind of facing there. But I just remember thinking, I'm like, well, let's document this out and do it from the top. So it was breaking down like, all right, Vin, like, what are you actually about? Truly when you look, and I think it has to be relative because it's like, what are you about at this moment in time? Because there was obviously something that wasn't fitting and we didn't know what that was. So we had to figure that out. And then as you go through that documentation process of starting from, all right, well, what are my values? And organically what we've found, and after doing this with like 10, 15 people now, is that generally our values, and for most people, they're around 3 different areas. It's like freedom, which includes everything that's time, money, things. It's connection, which is relationship and how you connect with the world and the people around you. And then I feel it's something around growth and memorable moments, you know, and I like the camera roll experiment where it's like, what are the things that you're taking photos of and what's making it into your camera roll? Because they're, for me, a lot of the people that when they smile, it's like those moments that are in the camera roll, whether it's going to watch their favorite football team or playing a round of golf or, you know, performing magic, whatever that might be. So then you get an overall picture and you list out maybe 5-6 things in each of those columns. And then from there, it's starting to really understand your key metrics, you know. So when we looked at yours, for example, like there was a clear winner there, like finances. Wow. You know, you exceeded every goal that you probably, you know, imagined, and you're doing something at a level that is genuinely elite, that very few people on the planet will touch that level of, you know, mastery and success, and you'd climb that mountain. But then when we started looking at the other,
I'll just quickly say that the reason that was, you know, I think, you know, so good was because that's all I did.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything else. All my actions were for the purpose of wealth creation. Mm-hmm. Like is I think a trap I think a lot of young people fall into is, again, more money solves everything, right? So the only thing I should focus on is more money, because more money will solve family issues, happiness issues, friendship issues, everything. Yeah. So that's the reason why. It wasn't because I was, I think, exceptionally amazing. It's just because I put all of my eggs in that one basket.
Yeah, for sure. But then I think what we also found was changing the narrative a little bit, because what you're really unique as well, because what you were doing with the money that you're earning is you were helping so many people too. It's like, so when we started tying that in with connection and, you know, all the other bits, it's like, oh, now it starts making sense, because I think a lot of us don't understand, like, why are we actually going to work? You know, and we don't have clarity on that. Like, why are we putting in the time and effort that we're putting into these things? Like, what is that actually linked to that's greater than a number or paying bills?
That just reminded me of something huge that you made me do, is that you see, you're right. I did spend a lot of that money that I made helping those in my family and those that I love, my friends, you know, help them achieve their dreams too. And I had forgotten those things. Mm-hmm. So remember, one of the biggest things we realized was that I was just so busy doing things to the point where I never sat and reflected. I never sat and wrote down the things that I did. So as a result, I was like, this is the worst year of my life. Like I genuinely felt like a failure last year at the peak of it all. Yeah. And it was one of those things where, because I didn't map things out, I didn't plan. I never had a command center for my life. My command center was just whatever comes to mind today.
Yeah. We just do it. It's reactive.
It was reactive. It was bloody terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what this exercise does, when you start really putting everything down on paper, like what's good in your life, what needs to maybe be improved or changed, is for a lot of people, it gives them perspective as well. It's like, wow, well, holy crap. A lot of it's pretty good. Like, maybe I don't need to change my job too much. If I break it down, I actually quite like it. I like the people that I work with. I like what I'm doing. You know, like, it's ticking all these goals. Maybe I need to tinker it slightly, because I'm also a big believer that, you know, where we are at life in the current point, for most part, there's a reason why we've ended up there, you know, and generally it's just optimizations. Like, very few people need to drastically throw everything out, you know, and it's like, we need wholesale changes here. Like, I need to get rid of all the people in my life. I need to quit my job. I need to run away. I need to do all that. You know, that'll probably be a very small minority. Whereas for the majority, it'll be that, well, 60% is pretty good. 70% is pretty good. If I optimize these few things, geez, it could be a game changer. And it's, again, going the 80-20 rule, right? Like, finding the bigger bits and pieces. And what you'll generally find if you do this process, you know, and obviously we won't spend much more time on it, but you end up with like 5 to 10 actions that you really need to take. And most people at any given time, they'll have 5 to 10 things that they need to do that will probably make up the majority, that will fill the majority of that perceived gap, or the next step that's required is. And then we found the same thing, right? Like, it wasn't, you had some pretty big ones, like obviously moving back to Australia and doing those things, but yeah.
Well,
I think that's
you helped me to stop the laziness. I was lazy in the sense that I never really self-examined. I never took the time to really examine my life, my values, my actions, my intentions, my goals. I really didn't. I again, just the trap of the only North Star I had was wealth creation and making more money. That was it. Didn't care about anything else. Everything else will be solved when I make more money. So that was the thing. What you really taught me, if I had to sum it down to a sentence, is that reality is negotiable. Yeah. Is that I was living by a set of rules that I thought could not be bent. So, again, the word lifestyle design, which is a huge part of this book, what it talks about is you can design the life you want. And I think the big message I hope people take away from it is that work is a part of your life. Work isn't your entire life. So just be so careful of that. I fell into that trap, and I'm just so glad I've learned that now. And because I'm that person that could have just gone to the end and then just died and never lived. Super easy for me to be that person. Super easy.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's big. It's big.
Yeah. So then I think to sum up that little thought there, I think we all don't need to become millionaires. We just want the lifestyle that millionaires have. And when you take away a lot of that, material things, because I'm just buying this because I want you to think I'm a better person. And that's true. The reason I keep going to car sales, I think, is because I want to have a car that I can drive around so that people go, oh, wow, damn, Vin's successful. So again, it's an external desire of what I want other people to think of me. And again, is that important?
Yeah.
No. So yeah, what I'm saying is we don't necessarily need a crap load of money. It's just, how do you have that lifestyle that they tend to have? And how can you have it by applying some of the strategies you learned in the book?
Well, and even just going a little bit further than that, I think it's figure out who you are and what that alignment is as well. Because that's the other side, right? Like if you want a nice car, I don't think there's anything wrong with that unless you feel that there's something wrong with that. Because that's also, like if that's aligned with who you are, and every single person's going to be different in what they're about and what they want. And I think that's also a little bit of the trap that everyone tries to fit a certain mold or a certain expectation. Like I've done the same thing where it's like, all right, I'm going to go full on Zen now. So I just can't have any negative thoughts. And it's like, well, that's not possible. Or it's like, I'm going to now do something like seriously extreme in the business world and scale up this thing to like X billions of dollars. And it's like, yeah, well, that's fine as well. But I think it's got to be about figuring out who you are. And the way that you do that is by just constant self-reflection and asking yourself those deeper questions. Like, is this important to me? Does this excite me? Is this something that fires me up? Like, does it feel good? Is this something that I need to learn or develop more? And finding
you made me do that.
Yeah.
Well, you made me do that. Do you remember? You made me go through a whole month plus of writing down every day what were the things that were peak experiences for me. What were things that made me feel good and lit me up? So we went through a very deep kind of self-analysis process where I wrote down the things that made me feel really good. And then I also wrote down the things that didn't make me feel good. I wrote down the thoughts that were keeping me up at night. So it was a very painful process because I hated doing it. Self-examination is not easy, man. I mean, I think it's so, it's funny because for you, I think it's easy for you, but it was definitely not easy for me.
No,
I hated the process.
It's not easy.
Well, because but then after a month worth of collecting data, after a month of writing these things down, you look back and you're going, wow, I can't believe that entire month. The biggest amount of joy that I got was sitting down with my son and watching this show together and us laughing together. And you lose sight of these things because you you get caught up. If I make more money, it'll all be okay. Yep. It's so, I think if you are currently in your life, and again, this is just nonsense, like no one asked for this advice, but I'm giving it anyway. But it's like, if you are thinking, if I just make more money, things will be okay. I think that is being lazy.
Yeah.
I think that's being lazy. Because the process of going through and actually writing down, oh, I felt good today because my wife said that, hey, you look really good in that shirt. It looks like you lost a little bit of weight. Yay. Oh, damn, man, that made me feel good. Cool. That's a bit of insight. I want to make sure I'm healthy and I'm fit and I'm eating well. So health is an important component. Yep. But it's funny until you examine yourself in that granular form of documenting every day what made you feel good, what made you feel terrible, do you then have more insight? Otherwise, your memory is terrible.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
You've got that document. I think touching on that documentation process is pretty critical. Like for people that maybe don't journal or aren't familiar with that type of concept, like a really simple thing that I personally do and have done for a long time now is just every day I have like 7, maybe 5 to 10 dot points in an Evernote. Yeah. It just scrolls and it's about certain thoughts, certain things that I did. Was it good? I even code them in colors sometimes, like where red was something that maybe needs improvement, green was a peak, blue was a lesson that was learned. And then I'll categorize them just with a few different emojis or words where it's like, all right, am I hitting all my boxes? Like, all right, did I meditate? What is the wake up time? How many actions did I do? My 3 big actions or 1 action or whatever it is for the day. Did I read? Was there some exercise in there? Whatever that looks like. And you just keep logging it. And it's one of those things that takes 2-3 minutes every single day. But I can now look back 4 or 5 years into the past and be like, I remember August 2016 was just an awesome time. Like what was happening at that period? And then it's got all these little notes in there. And it's like, oh, well, we went on a family trip to Bali. It's like, oh, let's see if we can, plan that in the near future. Obviously with COVID at the moment we can't, but there's but it gives you like a time capsule. So when you look at how do you figure out and how do you find your self-awareness, it's you just keep sort of logging it, tracking it, asking yourself the questions, testing different things, experimenting. And it's like a sculpture, like slowly you'll chisel away with it. It's not going to happen in one moment where it's like, oh, wow, I did this one exercise and on one piece of paper, I figured out everything about who I am. I don't think it's that simple, but over time, you'll get more clarity.
I'll give a pragmatic example again, right? So for me, one of the insights I got from it was I remember sitting down and doing this process, and I knew that at the end of it, every day I had to document, things that were good and things that were bad. And I remember one day my family and I, we invest in property. And like I never realized this trap you can fall into where, with wealth creation, you try to make more money, so you go into more debt. You try to make more money, so you go into more debt. You try to make more money, so you go into more debt. And I remember one day I was logging into, my banking and stuff, and I immediately felt a sense of anxiety when I looked at the debt that we've accumulated as we built our portfolio. And I would often feel the debt and then immediately be lazy and go, oh, but if I make more money, you'll be fine. Again, but then after that, all you do is you just get more debt, right? So then I noted that down, and then I remember reflecting on it over a couple of weeks, and I saw that this had come up like 3 or 4 times, but I would forget that it's come up 3 or 4 times, and then just kind of, again, just be lazy and I'll just make more money. But then when I saw that, all of a sudden now I was able to be more strategic and go, you know what? I don't want to acquire more debt. Yeah. I don't, because it actually makes me feel really anxious. Right. And I would have never seen that if I never sat down and did the kind of self-analysis and the looking at yourself under a microscope. I think nobody wants to look at themselves under a microscope because it's hard, A, and B, we want a simple solution. I just want you to give me something super easy that I can do. I don't want this to take 6 months. And to be absolutely transparent with everyone, I mean, the process we went through took months. It took months until now I'm able to sit down and I open up one document and I can see who I am as a human being. And there's something really satisfying to that.
Yeah.
Because, and this is the thing, Ali, I think one of the side effects of knowing who I am now with more clarity, and I think who we are is a moving target. It's not, this is who I am and it's who I am forever.
Yeah,
no, it's not. It changes every era of your life. You change and you kind of mold to a different kind of human. But now, as I know myself more, I'm less prone to the opinions of others.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, as I'm more certain in who I am, if you say, oh, Vin, you're this, I'm like, yeah, but I'm not. You're wrong. It's all good. Like, in my head, it just kind of, I have that bell sound. It's like, you're wrong. Yeah. You're wrong. Oh, yeah. And it gives you that self-assurance. So you have strongest sense of confidence in who you are. And I think that's important. And a part of the process that I will say as well is exploration and conversational discovery. The conversations we had helped a lot. The conversations I had with my wife helped a lot. The conversations I had with my friends helped a lot. So I think you've got to go on this journey with some people that you are close to. I think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really cool example as well. Like if you're looking at self-awareness, is doing the exercise of maybe writing down who you think you are, and then getting a few people that are close to you, and then getting them to write down what they think you are, and then you might be able to see, is there a gap? Like I remember we'd do, like me and my wife, we used to do those like personality tests there, or like, you've got one like that color code test. And I think what's really interesting is if I do it, then I get my wife to do it for me, so, and then seeing, is there a match up there? Because that to me is
that's interesting.
Like that's like, all right, well, is it, if it's aligned, it means that the self-awareness is pretty solid. And I think that's a good test. So if you're somebody that's trying to improve that a little bit, like go and do a couple of those online and see what you get versus what a few people that are close to you get, or you doing it.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up, the importance of having other people, and I think Ali talking about this self-awareness is important, is because you are the easiest person to fool.
Yeah.
It really is. And I'll say that in the example that we spoke about before, like let's just bring back that car example, right? It's like, it's so easy for me to justify it. And it's so easy for me. Like I'm so good at justifying things that probably are not necessary. I'm very good at it. I'm not only an effective communicator to others, I'm a very persuasive communicator to myself. So I think you've got to have that self-awareness of people around you who kind of understand your values and know who you are to call you out sometimes on your bullshit. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because But
like, let's do it now though, right? Like I'm nearly going the other way though. I feel like you're overcorrecting on this. Like why do you feel so bad about wanting the car? Like, see, but that's the thing, you got to look at it holistically, right? Like what's so bad about the car? Like what's making you feel so gross about it? Because there's obviously one side that wants it.
Yeah, well, it's okay. So, okay, well, let's use this as an experiment. Sure. All right, let's take my insecurities and just lay it out there for the rest of the world. Sure, let's do it. I want the car. I'll be super transparent with you and all of our listeners. But I think I want the. Well, no, it's not think, it's believe. I believe I want the car because I feel insecure. And if I was to run an event or a presentation and I rocked up in a car that, just doesn't scream success, people will go, wait, hang on a second. Why are we paying this guy so much? Yeah. And it's an insecurity thing. It's a thing where I'm afraid that people will then go, maybe he's not as successful as we thought. And so that is one of the reasons. Second reason, it's because I think it looks cool. Yep. Third reason, that was a very shallow reason, but third reason is I want to reward myself. Like, I feel like I've worked my ass off. I've, like, you know this, I helped a lot of people in my family, and I don't feel like I live that excessively, and I want to just treat myself, Yep.
Yeah.
Give yourself a good old pat on the shoulder. You've done a good job, son. Get yourself something nice.
So what's the downside? What's making you not want it?
Well, I feel bad because it's like, during this time, COVID time, you should be more defensive. You could use this money for way better things. That reasonable voice in our head that kind of comes into play and goes, but could you be using it for something else? Should you be putting that away, for your children, all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, damn you, voice in the head.
Yeah, the voice in the head. And that's the funny thing with this one, because it's like, Like, to me, the three reasons on the upside there, even though they might sound stupid, they make sense. The reason on the downside, like, say if it's within the means and it's not going to stretch it that much, like there is logic in the sense that in the work that you do, who knows if you have to take a client out or whatever, if like, does it make a difference or not? Like, you know, it's like the real estate agent analogy. Like, if the real estate agent rocks up in a shabby thing, will the client go with another real estate agent because they're not perceiving whatever the image is, or like, is it like part of the uniform that's required? But again, like, I'm not saying that it's the right decision to buy it or not. But again, like, it's like you use the same exercise. It's like, what here is truth? What's bullshit? What aligns or doesn't? And then why? You know, there might be more exploration even on that, even though it's something so simple. But it's maybe not that binary.
Well, I also think that I'm really bad at rewarding myself as well. I mean, I will admit that. Like, that's, you know, am I fooling myself right now? I don't know. But I also think that I'm not good at rewarding myself.
Yeah.
I feel guilty when I reward myself. And I'm curious, I wonder where that guilt comes from. It's almost like, oh, you don't deserve this, you bastard. You know, and it's like, it's super strange. It's super strange. It's like, and I also think it's because
imposter syndrome, right? That we all have. It's like, but also because that feeling.
Well, growing up in a family where you've taught to always be frugal, you know, mom and dad always bought Toyotas. You know, we had a Camry that we bought in 1996 that I was still driving, like, you know, 6-7 years ago. It's just you get taught to just you hoard. It's just, but then something. This is me justifying it. You know, everything that you have in your life right now is for rent. You don't own any of it.
Yeah.
Like, as much as you think you own the stuff you have, oh, I own my house. No, you don't. It's for rent. You give it back when you go. It's like the whole story of this kid who plays Monopoly with his grandmother. And he was like so obsessed about winning all the properties and gathering all these properties and then hotels. And then his grandma says, but grandson, what happens at the end of every game? Everything goes back in the box. And it's like realizing for me, I want to get the car. I want to enjoy it. I want to love it. I want to be able to have it as a symbol of success, not only for others to see, but for myself to go, damn, man, you worked hard these last few years and you deserve this. But I'm also mindful because I don't want to be you buy the Porsche and guess what? Now you want the Ferrari. And you've got the Ferrari and now you want the Lamborghini. Now you've got the Lamborghini. Now you want the jet. Like, I don't want to fall victim to that. I really don't. I want to live meaningfully because I now know I've got a little 2-year-old boy looking at me and the things I do will infiltrate his mind and cause him to live a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just going through the analysis period right now going, is the intent here pure enough or is it a load of nonsense and you're just insecure? And
I love that sentence, you know, about the actual
insecure.
No, the purity. Like, is this aligned and pure? Because I think that's where the answer lies. When you get closer to that, it points you in the right direction. Because if you look at even some of the dialogue in that, it's like, a bit of it's around what will people think? A little bit about it is how will it look? You know, so are those worth exploring a little bit further? Because that's not really internally driven, right? Like, that's more around the external perception. Rather than what is it that you actually want and how does it then align with that? So I don't know, like it's a cool one to explore. I'll
tell you why this is relevant to even this book and how it all comes together, right? Is because let's say, for example, I buy the car, right? I buy the car and I deplete some of my savings. And then as a result, now maybe I'll fall victim to going, oh, crap, I just bought this car. I've depleted the reserves. Now I need to go make more money again. And now I need to work for the sake of work or I overwork again. So it's like, I know I'm such a workaholic. I'm such an addict that if I deplete these reserves, then I know immediately we'll kick into gear. Oh, look, I should go back to, 80 hours a week again. So the reason I'm being super cautious is I'm like, I've got enough self-awareness to know myself now is that, will I fall victim to that? And let's bring it back, right? One of the most important things I think I got from the book is the concept that you touched upon in the beginning of mini retirements. In that fundamentally what Tim Ferriss says in this book is that we're living wrong in the terms of education early life, work for hard for 40, 50 years, and then retire for the last little bit of your life. I think what's critical to understand here is he says, no, it's not one big retirement. It's many, 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 many little mini retirements all along so that you enjoy your whole journey through. Yep. I love that. I love that. I have definitely started doing that, I think about 3-4 years ago, where each year, and it sounds ridiculous if you don't subscribe to this and if you don't do this, but each year, my family and I do between 3 to 4 trips away. Yep. But I will tell you where I sucked is even though I was away, I was still thinking about work.
Yeah.
So I applied the lessons without having shifted the mindset. I applied the lessons without having shifted my brain. And I did the actions, but I didn't feel the emotional benefits. Only now when we can't travel, where I'm doing these other little mini trips with my family, where you just drive to 2 hours away in South Australia, have I switched off and went, wow, mini retirements are incredible. Whereas before I did the action, but didn't really benefit from it. Now I'm doing it. It's been a game changer.
How do you unplug? Like when you go,
none of these. Yeah. Have to get rid of this. This is one of the deadliest things that destroys my ability to disconnect. So it's like we were already planning another little mini retirement with my friends and my family here. And I wish you could join us. I'm so sorry you're locked in Melbourne, but the moment that you're no longer in lockdown, you have to join us in one of our kind of journeys.
For sure.
Mini retirements. But what I've already said to my entire group of friends and cousins and everything is that we will get a box and we'll put all of our phones into a box and no one is allowed to touch the phone. And we will all allow ourselves a maximum of 15 minutes a day where you go check your phones. And then after that, no one's going to go on the phones.
I love it.
And that's how we do it. And all of a sudden you find yourself going, like you actually sit down and say to each other, so what do you guys want to do? Yeah. Whereas before we never say, so what do you guys want to do? Before we're all just, right. Yeah. Literally all of us are doing that.
Yeah.
So it's amazing
of like boredom and silence.
Yeah.
Like genuine boredom just doesn't exist anymore. It's like nearly a gift to get bored and to start thinking of creative ways to stimulate yourself because we've got the device. Like you can always get a dopamine hit by logging into something. It's full on.
And it was crazy because our challenge that we gave ourselves was like, all right, so we have to start a fire with only one match. So we had a whole box of matches, but we're allowed to use one match. So then we got really creative and then we got some candles and we're like, okay, but if that match goes out, then so we have to get a couple of candles as backup, keep a candle going in the house, have to bring the fire from inside the house to outside the house. I mean, in hindsight, could have lit the house on fire, but it was so therapeutic for all of us to now all of a sudden we were bored and we had to find a way to engage ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that boredom is, and it's a part of what this book talks about because if you can't unplug, mini retirements are not real. Like you're lying to yourself because even when I took my family to Japan, we went to Hong Kong, went to Malaysia, but half of the time I was just saying that, oh yeah, but I promise. Yeah. This is the only email I'll do today. And then it'll come to, look, I know that was the last one, but this is the last one. And it's just, man, I wasn't living. So I have to say that reading this book the second time, I didn't look at any of the pragmatic stuff. I was skipping through the pragmatic stuff because I was like, I've done that. I've been there. I'm now looking for the mindset shift of lifestyle design.
Yeah. That's cool.
I want to design a life that I love, Ali. And I encourage people who have listened to this long that design a life that you actually love. Don't just do what you love in terms of work, but consciously design a life that you love.
Yeah. It's bloody powerful.
Yeah. I mean, that's how about yourself? I mean, do you have any kind of final thoughts on this book that you want to raise? I've got a couple more things I'll point out, but do you have any others?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that I just 100% agree on the concept of designing the best possible life you can for yourself, you know, given what you've got at your disposal. Because that to me is always the real big thing with this, is like keeping it relative and understanding that, you know, there's different circumstances all over the world and people are in different situations, and not to put it on a pedestal. Like, I think if I look at one danger with this book is that it nearly romanticizes this notion.
Yeah.
And it can cause unhappiness on the other end, because it can cause anxiety for people. It can make people feel dissatisfied and uncomfortable, because like the book talks about it at the end as well. Like, if you do get into a position of freedom or lifestyle design, there's a flip side to it. There's isolation. There's, you know, the feeling of not being enough and not doing enough, and productivity and all of these things. So again, if you go down this path, it's really important to make sure it does align with who you are and who you want to become. Like, for me, it was a no-brainer. Like, when I was reading that book, I remember reading it already thinking that I'm implementing a lot of these philosophies and principles in my life. So when I saw this book, I'm like, holy crap, like, here's someone that's actually just written down all these things so they make sense, you know, like, and wow, there's actually principles and theories behind this, and I could improve it a little bit more. So when I was looking at that book, I remember early on in the piece, I'm like, this is a really well-aligned handbook for me. And it's not picking all the bits. I think that's the other part with this book, is pick the bits that suit your life. You don't need to follow it, you know, 100%, but find the bits that are going to move you a little bit closer to it. I think the other part for me is, we haven't really touched on this, but it's to me, this is a book about freedom ultimately. And how do you pragmatically implement freedom or more freedom into your life? And I wonder what that means for you. Like, when you're reading the book.
Yeah.
Like,
freedom for me represented working to live. Like, I know I'm bringing this up a lot, but this is a huge pain point of mine. I was not free because I was addicted to work. Like, I wasn't free. I just wasn't. And I'm only free now because I feel like I'm not working 100% of the time. I'm working more like 40% of the time, 30% of the time. And I'm living the other 60% of the time. So my freedom came from a kind of, all these rules that I had they no longer exist. The whole, you need to work 8 hours a week to be, you know, the breadbringer of the family. Like, I feel like they've been banished. They're completely gone now. I no longer think that way. I think about how can I become extremely efficient and effective at the same time. So the freedom comes from being more efficient and effective, you know, and focusing on the 80-20. So now I've got time, and I think there's this wonderful definition of life where they say that life happens in the space between you being busy, right? So now I've got less busy times. There's more space in between. So there's more life happening now. In a sense, I feel more free. But you're right as well in thinking that you've got to be careful. 4 hours a week. If you're only working 4 hours a week, you better be Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah. And even Tim Ferriss admits, like, he doesn't work 4 hours a week. You know, like, I think that was one of the big things where it gets misconstrued. Like,
great book title.
Working. Yeah, it's a great book title. And that's just his mentality of testing and split testing different things, right? Like, I think he tested like 50 different titles, and this was the one that had the biggest click-through rate. So he went with it. You know, it's that pragmatic thinking outside the box type of mindset where, you know, like I think and that's the big thing, is don't get put off by the title. Like, it's about more around how do you fill in the 80 hours with stuff. And that's the biggest thing that this has given me over, say, the last 6-7 years since I read that book. It's say, if you look at it just pragmatically, statistically, from a time allocation perspective, is now when I look back over the last 5 or 6 years, so much more of my time is proactive. It's not reactive. It's not an obligation, and it's not misaligned. Like, it's not spending time on things where I'm possibly not the most valuable that I can be, or the most impactful, or is the most enjoyable. Like it's limiting that. And to me, that's what freedom means. It's about with the resource of mind, focus, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, concentration, creativity. That to me is the goal that this book helped with a lot, was getting me closer to the point where, all right, well, now it doesn't feel like work's going to be there, and there's going to be crappy parts of work that still always exist. But for the most part, it's pretty aligned. Like the things that we're solving, working on, building the business, the team that you're working with, the people that you're working with. There's just so many ticks. It's not like, oh, I can't be bothered meeting with that person on Monday. That's the worst. Like I remember I used to have meetings like that, or like you'd have that colleague that would walk past and like you just shut up because that they're going to put down some negative crap on you that you're going to have to deal with for a little bit. It's like those things, it's like, how do you is there ways to design a life that lets you move away from that? Like my wife says it, she's like, Ali, the one thing that you do is like, if it's shit, you'll try to fix it. You're not just going to let it sit and just keep copying the downside. And I think that's a mindset shift that the book potentially teaches as well, that it's like, all right, well, if you've got stuff in your life that you don't really like, what can you do personally to change it?
And bringing it back to what
outside the box.
And bringing it back to what you've kind of said to me multiple times, and even the book states it, right, is that reality, you can negotiate it.
It's negotiated.
But I think a lot of the times we fall into the trap of thinking, this is how it's going to be forever. Ah, crap. There's nothing I can do. We tend to think we don't have that much power, but you kind of, the analogy I tend to use is that you're the author of your own book. You are the one holding the pen. You get to write what you want. And sometimes I think we've just given away our pen to somebody else, and you just realize you can take that pen back anytime.
Yep, for sure.
You can take it back anytime. They can seem like it's theirs, but no, it's actually yours. You can take it back. It's got your name on it. So I think that's something really important to realize. And I love that. I love that quote your wife said, is that if it's shit, you fix it.
Yeah.
So I think we can almost sum this book up as, if there are aspects of your life where you're unhappy, especially if it relates to, working too much, doing too much work for work's sake, I think this book is going to give so many strategies for people to be able to optimize that.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. And it's, don't be put off by the title.
Yeah.
Give it a shot. It's actually a fantastic book. Yeah. Any last words from you, Ali, before we...
Bro, I think we've gone down the rabbit hole as required on this one. It was a fun book to chat about, just because, personally, this is one of the big ones. It's had a big impact on me. I know, even though a lot of entrepreneurs out there probably don't admit it, this is a pretty important book for a lot of people that made the shift into pursuing entrepreneurship. So that I think from a time management, time allocation perspective, there's so many bits of value in this. You said it earlier, effectiveness. So even if you just pick and choose some of the chapters within the book, there's value there. It's one of the greatest return on investments for $15 or $20 that you're probably going to get. Like, I recommend this book a lot.
And one of the last things I'll mention as well, this was mentioned by a wonderful kind of venture capitalist, Naval Ravikant, who says that, when you read a book, don't feel like you have to read it from beginning to end. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't read, is because they go, oh, if I start the book, I'm going to have to finish it. And then the middle bit's kind of boring. And then this one chapter is not relevant to them. And then they just go, oh, it's so hard to get through this chapter. And then they don't finish the book, right? So think of a book as blog posts. Each chapter is a blog post. So Naval says this. So when I read a book, like when I read this book again, Ali, I can tell you now that like the middle chapters, I didn't even read it, because I don't need to read how to get a virtual assistant again. I don't have to read I don't need to do that again. So I read the core chapters. Yeah, I read the core chapters that were relevant to me. I read the mini retirement chapter again. I read the mindset in the beginning of the, relevant income and all of this. So when you read, because look, the funniest thing about this podcast, I think, Ali, is that we were two of the guys that paid the least attention in school, the least academic people, our entire friendship groups. And now we do a podcast about reading.
Yeah.
That's almost offensive in itself. It's ridiculous. So I think just take that tip from Naval, and when you're reading a book, whether it be this one or any book you want to pick up, make sure you just read it like a blog post. Read ones that are relevant. It's okay. No one's going to come and knock on the door and put you in jail.
Yep, for sure.
Right,
and pick a couple of things to apply and test. Like that's the other thing. Like this book has so many little exercises, and that's what I really liked about it too. Like it was the first book I remember reading that actually gave you the formula. You know, it wasn't just concepts and stories and you could do this. He's like, oh, literally, if you want to overcome your fears, here's 5 things that you can do. If you want to set goals, here's 10 things that you can do. Like, I love that in this book. So go and test out some of the things and then see what happens. Like, I think that's
and also one last thing I'll mention as well. I keep saying one last thing, but like and
we can keep going, bro. It's fine.
We just keep going. Yeah, and it's our podcast. Why am I?
There's no time limit.
Thanks for letting me know that reality is negotiable. Everything's negotiable. Yeah. Get that car. No, look, what I'll say is, and if you read something and you don't agree with it, sit with it for a bit. I've learned to do that. When someone says something I don't agree with, my initial reaction is like, no, you're wrong. You know, I have to save you from your, you know, the doom that you're going to ultimately meet because of the way of thinking that you have. So now I've realized that when someone says something that I don't agree with, my immediate reaction now is instead of going, no, this is what it is, I say, oh, it's really interesting. And I'll actually sit with it for a bit, because what's the alternative? The alternative is you've got a bunch of set beliefs right now and values and lessons in your life, and you believe that's the only ones that exist, and you go through your entire life now only living with those examples and lessons, and you're not going to live a very fruitful life. So to me, when I hear an idea that kind of upsets me or even sometimes makes you go, wait, what? I sit with it for a bit. And I think that's important. You know, because this book does do that. There are a lot of things you read in this book and you kind of go, oh, you know, really? You know, but just give it a keep an open mind. Keep an open mind.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that, because now I'm remembering back to some of the things. Like, I think there's an exercise to just go and stare in people's eyes for like 5 minutes. So I remember reading that and I'm like, I'm probably not going to do that.
There's another exercise where it says to go lay on the floor anywhere as you're going out, and just lay on the floor and get used to feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like, again, it's so true. It's like there are so many rules that we have in our lives that we think are true. And I think one of the reasons Ali and I created this kind of podcast is we want to encourage more people to start reading. And I'm not saying you don't have to finish a book. Maybe just pick a book, pick 3 chapters in that book that's super relevant to you right now that you can apply tomorrow, and just read that, you know, because we have this concept that we talk about a lot where we say that it's so scary to me when we talk about our brain being an operating system, and that when you read a book, it updates your operating system. Otherwise, imagine I don't read anything, I don't take in any new information, and then you talk to me 5 years from now, I will still be running the same operating system from today in 5 years. And that could be Windows 98. And we kind of say this, Windows 95, or DOS, you know, and I think the scary thing that Ali and I, and this is, you know, it's kind of, maybe it's a little bit mean of us, but there are people I meet in my life where I'm like, I feel like I'm talking to Windows 95. I can't do it. Just can't, you know, and yeah, I just think, and sometimes we will fall into that. And you know, you may be listening to this and going, damn, they're still in DOS, you know, and
they're still in DOS.
That's the thing. I think we're doing this because we're encouraging people to, you know, hey, pick up a book, update the operating system. And,
it's the easiest way, right? Like there is, like again, you look at the 80-20 rule, the return on investment from a book is outrageous. Like it's crazy what a $20 book, like, because that's 10 years, 5 years, 20 years of someone's distilled knowledge, and they've put it in chapters and in structures and all of that. So even if you disagree with the book, like the worst thing that's going to happen is it might get you thinking about something that's even in your head or generating thought. Like that's the biggest thing. Like when I hear the sentence, I don't have time to read, like it's just a signal that there's probably an adjustment that maybe needs to be made there. You know, it's either that it's not that you don't have time. It's either you don't value it, you don't like it, or you're just living in an environment that's so reactive that, you're right. That's the one thing that probably is going to get pushed under it. So if you're in that boat, like that could be a good impetus. If you're sitting there and you're like, oh yeah, but I just don't have time to read right now. It's like, well, can you find 10 minutes when you're on the toilet? Or whatever it is. Like, is there 5 minutes that you can do to read half a chapter, and slowly you'll get a book done? You know, like I think it's just a proactive move, you know, because not reading is reactive, saying that you don't have time to read. Proactive is carving out 5, 10, 15 minutes and putting it in there if it's something that's important to you.
And this is what we're going to end on, because the electrician at my house is working on things in the house and he's starting to drill. But what I will say, I guess in closing, is
one last thing.
One last thing is that when we're using the analogy of upgrading your operating system, think of it this way, in that there are viruses that are in our minds right now, viruses that cause us to be unhappy. So there may be a virus in your brain right now that's causing you to be unhappy. There is an operating system upgrade out there for you that if you upgrade the operating system, it will crush that virus. And the virus that this book helps crush is the virus of working for the sake of working, and also living a life that is not by design. So if you find yourself suffering from that virus, this is a great software update for you to upgrade your operating system. What a great summary by Vinh. Giving myself a bit of a pat on the back on that one. Bye for now, everyone. That's the end of our 3rd episode. Tell us in the comment section what you think. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Awesome. Cheers.